On this episode of The Process, a new segment I'm going to call Headline Grab, and then a closing argument titled Woman's Work. But first, here's American Aquarium. Welcome to The Process, with me, your host, Adam Sommer. Welcome into The Process. This is Adam Sommer. I am your host, as I told you with my own words just a moment ago. Thanks for being here. It is Monday, March 17th. It is St. Patrick's Day, which is, I like St. Patrick's Day. I think it's a great holiday because it's really, there's no pressure. Like, you don't have to do anything on St. Patrick's Day. You don't have to, see all your family. You don't have to buy everybody presents. You don't have to do anything. But if you want to, you can have a lot of fun. So I'm a big corned beef fan, love this stuff. And a few years ago, we were with a group of friends on St. Patrick's Day, and we were all going to go get some corned beef and cabbage. We're like, yeah, let's do it, right? And so we go to a place that we know is having the special, and we walk in, and it's just wall-to-wall, right? It's, asses and elbows, right? So we're like, this is insane. We don't want to wait an hour to eat corned beef and cabbage. That's probably not even going to be that great anyway. But we definitely don't want to do this. So we're like, what do we do? We're like, let's go get Mexican food. So we did. And do you know how many people were at the Mexican restaurant? Almost none. Almost none. It was wonderful. So what we figured out was, for Cinco de Mayo, we're going to make corned beef and cabbage. on St. Pat's Day, we're going to go get some Mexican food. So it was kind of a tradition for a while. But I'm looking forward to some corned beef. I have one in the fridge. By the time you're listening to this, it'll probably be getting prepped to eat on Monday the 17th. So very excited for that. I hope that you have a wonderful week as spring starts to continue to roll in. It's getting so nice. We had some snow. We had some crazy, weird windstorms, but it seems like we're finally rounding that corner. Officially spring coming up just a few days from now. So that's super duper wonderful. Very happy about that myself. Got to celebrate my birthday this past weekend. I turned 40. It happened, much to my chagrin. So here I am at the wise, ripe age of 40, coming at you here with The Process. So reminder that you can find me over on Patreon at patreon.com/theprocess. You can join over there. And your monthly contribution of $1, $2, $5 a month. I'm not asking you to crack open the piggy bank here a bunch, just a little bit to help defray the cost of making this and making it a supporting, self-sustaining, I guess, a supported, self-sustaining thing that I can do to make these shows and to spend time doing this work outside of my regular day-to-day life. So thank you to those who are over there, patreon.com/theprocess, and giving me your support. I appreciate every single one of you. All right, up first is the new segment, Headline Grab. I was trying to figure out a way to do this right. I want to talk about different things, different stories, and I'm, doing this solo now. And so sometimes I'll have guests and whatnot, but how do I still talk about the things I want to talk about? So I'm going to call it Headline Grab. I'm going to grab some stories and just give you kind of quick hit, right? Here's what the story is. Here's kind of my reaction to it. Nothing crazy, just hit it and move on. And then I've got a closing argument for you titled Women's Work. So stick around. That's the show. And here comes Headline Grab. All right, first up here, I'm going to start with a national story. This is from State's Newsroom reporting Washington, a federal judge in California ordered the Trump administration to immediately reinstate thousands of jobs for probationary federal workers fired as part of billionaire Elon Musk's campaign to slash the federal workforce. This is a story written from the D.C. Bureau from State's Newsroom from Ashley Murray is the journalist on this. It continues. Judge William Alsup ruled Thursday morning, this was last week on the 13th, that tens of thousands of workers must be rehired across numerous federal agencies, including the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, Energy, Interior, Treasury, and Veterans Affairs, extending his previous temporary emergency order issued February 28th. So we're hitting that zone that I talked about weeks ago, which is during the initial, the inauguration and everything. I think there was a lot of folks that were just still processing. And I talked about it. I did TikToks about it. I talked about it on here that, everybody's going to take their time to sort of process the reality of the fact that, like, this is happening, right? This administration is happening. This presidency is happening. All of the things you're seeing are real, and you can, want it to not be real, but it is. And so the question is not, why are we here or how are we here, but what do you do now? Because we can spend all day long talking about 2024, the Democratic, messaging and the failures and this and then that and the other. And, Biden should have, announced a one-term presidency, immediately, which was what I wanted, right? There's all sorts of different angles you could take on it. There should have been a full primary. They should have had a chance for somebody else. They shouldn't have anointed. They should have, whatever. The bottom line is we're here. And Trump is the president, and he's doing these things. And what I was talking about then was that I'm going to look for this spring, that I'm looking for the court cases. I'm looking for the rulings, I'm looking for the judgments, and I'm looking for what is going to become eventual Supreme Court fodder, some of it for the October 2025 session. And then this time next year, we'll be anticipating rulings, we'll be having oral arguments, and we'll be getting ready to see the late spring, early summer rulings from the Supreme Court from a lot of these initial challenges to Trump's authority and his, essentially his king-like demeanor as he goes about saying that his thoughts are essentially the law. So that's one of the big ones, the hiring and firing, who's in charge, who's not in charge. It's going to be a huge problem for them because on the one hand, they're basically trying to say that Elon Musk is in charge of all these things. But on the other hand, they have to deal with it from a legal standpoint. And they're going to have actual legal authority for all the things that are happening. And if they just say the president wishes it and therefore it is so, I don't think the judges are going to be convinced by that. I'll be very honest with you. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work even with the conservative judges on the Supreme Court. And I'm not counting Sam Alito anymore because he's no longer a conservative judge. He's MAGA. Sam Alito, I don't care what he has to say about anything at this point. But the other 8, I don't think quite fall into that camp. And so I think this is going to be really tough for the Trump administration to make some of these arguments because of what they're saying in public versus the authority that they're trying to do. So we will see where it goes, but that's one of the big ones that jumped out at me first. In that same category, this one is also States Newsroom DC Bureau, written by, looks like, Shawneen Miranda. And the headline on this one is Democratic Attorneys General Sue Trump Over U.S. Education Department Layoffs. Same category, right? It's another authority case. The complaint asked the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts to block the department from implementing the, quote, reduction in force and President Donald Trump's directive to dismantle the Department of Education. Here we go, right? We're back to an authority question. These are bubbling up. There's going to be more of them. So those were 2 that jumped out at me on the Trump side of things right away. And now I'm going to zoom in here to Missouri, where I'm at. A couple of things going on in the Missouri legislature. One of them, this is from Missouri Net, written by Alyssa Nelson. Bid to scrap Missouri's minimum wage paid sick leave law wins House approval. That's right, folks. In fact, one representative, who I'm not going to play the video and I'm not going to name their name because, frankly, they don't deserve any coverage on that particular issue, but they said that we should ignore the will of the people, that we've got to just not look at it because it doesn't matter. Why? Because the people are too stupid to understand what they're voting for. They think we're so dumb that when we say this is what we want, they will undo it if they don't think it's a smart thing. But as long as it's good for them and what they want, they're fine with it. They are fine with it. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Shout out to Representative Jacqueline Zimmerman from Manchester. She said, quote, everyone here talks about their commitment to the Lord and religion, and every day I hear those words, and I am hearing today is we are not going to take care of the less fortunate, we are not going to take care of the poor, and we're not going to take care of the sick. Well said. Also in Missouri, a bill that might actually make some sense, a bill that could ban GPS trackers that are used to secretly monitor people. This is a big issue. I work in the family law realm, and it is a problem, right? We have people who will put these little trackers, and they won't tell people that they're doing it, and they will use it, and it's frankly quite gross. I get it. You want to put a tag in your kid's backpack. Parents and kids, that's totally different. You want to put one in your golf clubs because you sometimes go someplace where you might leave your golf clubs and you don't want to lose them. Computer bags, stuff like that. I totally understand the use of these things, the Apple AirTags or whatever. But to put it in somebody's vehicle, people do it, and it's gross. So, it's House Bill 971, House Bill 971. So that's an interesting one to look at. It's sponsored by Cecily Williams, who is a Republican. And so, it's a good reminder that Republican and MAGA aren't necessarily always the same thing. I know that that's a hard thing to swallow sometimes, but it's true. And it's worth looking at that. Also in Missouri, there is, along with the legislature trying to get rid of the minimum wage law, there is a case that is at the Missouri Supreme Court asking that question, whether or not the law itself violates the Missouri Constitution. And so there is a challenge on it, and the challenge is, and this is the quote from the attorney Mark Ellinger, who is arguing for the Associated Industries of Missouri and other plaintiffs. So they're trying to overturn the law. They're the plaintiffs bringing the suit. And they say that the entire Proposition A should be vacated because it contains more than one subject matter. And they're saying the Missouri Constitution is very clear that a statutory initiative must have one subject expressed clearly in its title. Proposition A doesn't have one subject clearly expressed in its title. It has two subjects. Meanwhile, the attorney for the Secretary of State's office is defending it. The central measure of the act at issue are to increase the minimum wage and increase the minimum amount of sick time. Well, establish a minimum amount of sick leave that must be provided to employees, by their employers. Those things pretty clearly relate to one subject, which is employee compensation. So it's a pretty simple argument back and forth. It passed with almost 58% of the vote. So frankly, it's just offensive to me that when 58% of a state full of people, 6 million people in the state, when 58% of the voting populace votes to say this is what we want, the challenges are ridiculous, and I hope that all of them fail. And then finally, in Missouri, interestingly enough, there is a pretty big push, at least verbally, there is a big push from Governor Mike Kehoe to allocate $10 million in grant funding to support partnerships between employers, community organizations, and the child care industry to increase the number of available child care slots for Missouri families. It's great on paper. I'm glad that that's what he is announcing, but, devil's going to be in the details. Proof's going to be in the pudding, whatever colloquial phrase you want to use to say that just because somebody says something in the State of the State address doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It doesn't mean that we're going to find it in the budget. So hopefully we will find it in the budget, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that because we are, of course, talking about the Missouri legislature, which is very, very busy trying to overturn the will of the people. So we'll see if they have time to get to the governor's budgetary requests or not. But it goes right into the theme that I want to talk about with my closing argument, because childcare deserts, childcare shortages, childcare costs, everything related to childcare is a huge deal. And I got to thinking the other night about childcare in general. And it really was because of this distinction that I've been trying to wrestle with, which is Democrat. There's plenty of folks who would tell you I'm not a Democrat, but I am a progressive, or I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. And I think that we're sort of seeing that now with Republicans and MAGA, where there is still a split. There's still a divide where the Republicans have essentially ceded control of their party. And not essentially, they have. They gave up control. And in the process, some of them converted, but not all of them really did. And, there's a big difference between folks who have said, I'm going to support President Trump because versus the true MAGA, everything Trump says is the law, is true, is perfect, right? Those are different people. They're different groups of folks altogether. And it got me thinking about a label because, we talk about progressive policies, and then we talk about this like as if the antithesis of that is just conservatism. And I don't think it is. And so that's what I was wrestling with, and that's when this thought hit me, and I sat down and I wrote what you're about to hear, which is a closing argument that I'm titling Woman's Work. What if one of your goals is to quite literally reverse progress? Not just conservative, not keeping things the way they are, not maintaining status quo, turning back the clock. What if your actual goal is regressive policy? That is what the MAGA movement has become. We've been talking about the difference between progressives and conservatives for decades. It's because the clash over what was really more of an economic agenda set that up. Women had been making inroads into the Republican Party socially, and historically, not just women, but even men in the GOP included members with more progressive tendencies. The last century of American politics, however, has seen this sort of stratification of ideology. And over time, the modern GOP has flipped its messaging from this sort of compassionate conservative to what amounts today to little more than mean-spirited trolling. Right? Owning the libs became a cultural meme. And all it really meant was getting someone to react to something, right? Which isn't that hard to do. It's part of why I preach restraints, because that's their whole goal, right? Is to get that engagement. That's why they put it out there in the first place. Shock value became a game, and what can start out as this sort of jokey, sarcastic, sort of ironic, look at me, haha, look what I did, it can become more than that, and it can actually develop into a habit, a real habit, right? The kind of thing that is difficult to change because it is so ingrained. Because habits are not quick. They're not overnight. Habits form, right? They're picked up. We talk about habits the way we talk about learning a musical instrument, right? I just started playing the guitar one day, and I kept going until I picked it up. I added chords, I started learning a scale or two, and I kept playing. Now, I've never considered myself a guitar player, but objectively speaking, I own 6 guitars and play at least an hour a week, right? Even in a week when I'm really busy, I find time to play my guitar. At some point in time, my subjective view of what I am becomes irrelevant. I have become a guitar player by any objective measure. A habit repeated over time becomes not merely a behavior, but an identity. Habits are also hard to break. If you've ever been a smoker, you know well. And think about that label. Not a person who smokes, not being into smoking, but being a smoker. Because a habit repeated over time becomes not merely a behavior, but an identity. I picked up smoking the way a lot of folks pick up owning the libs. It was kind of ironic and part of fitting in. I didn't see myself as a smoker, but I sure behaved like one. I had to go out to smoke. I smelled like smoke. I burned my clothes. I spent money on cigarettes. I had lighters in every important place that I needed them because I repeated the habit over time and became not only a behavior, but an identity. I became a smoker. I used to want to smoke when I was driving for years after I quit. What started as a chemical addiction created the habit. It's a double layer. It's why it's so hard to quit. It's a psychological and physiological manifestation of this thing. It's quite a combo. But what if that habit is pretending, to own the libs and to be ironic? You're pretending that you think women shouldn't vote. You're pretending that you think these particular odd, regressive policy issues. And then one day you stick with it for a while. And you find, suddenly, you're voting for it at the ballot box because you picked it up. Maybe you don't identify yourself as a regressive person. Maybe you don't identify yourself even as MAGA. But you picked it up. Not because you formed a well-informed opinion over time, not because you came to a conclusion after sitting with it, but because you were fed a message with the goal to make you repeat it. And eventually you do. The problem is that also means the new belief needs to become rooted, so you develop a rationalization of the belief and position. Chemically, it gives you a rush. It's fun to feel smart and to have a group that you fit into. There is a reason MAGA is so attractive to young men. It provides a sense of belonging that progressive policy doesn't address. Then that chemical release is paired with the habit, and bingo zippo, you've got a good old-fashioned addiction. MAGA is to the human brain as smoking is to the human lung. It's hard to stop doing it, no matter how many facts you're presented with, because it's not about the facts. It's not about reality. It's about the fulfillment of the need. Now let's apply that to daycare and women's ability to work. Stay with me here. As daycare costs rise in America, it's become harder and harder to find good options. Ask any parent the hardest part about having little kids. Trust me, it's finding good, affordable childcare. We had a stretch with 2 kids in full-time daycare. It was like having a second mortgage on the house. It sucked. But the costs keep going up and the options keep dwindling. Now we have a federal administration that is going out of its way to cut funding for anything and everything that even remotely supports folks who cannot afford daycare. Governor Kehoe can say all he wants that that's what's going to happen. I'll believe it when he signs it. The regressive policies of Project 2025, which Trump lied about every day for months. And that bears repeating. The regressive policies of Project 2025, which Trump lied about every day for months, will make it harder for families to balance child care costs with work, eventually making young families reevaluate their decision-making. So here's the question. Who's going to stay home? It's a rhetorical question because we already know the answer. You know. It'll be women. Mostly, it'll be women. Now suddenly, having a family means you probably can't keep a career. 6 months at home becomes a year. A habit, repeated over time, becomes not merely a behavior, but an identity. The regressive goals of MAGA, the regressive goals of Project 2025, the regressive goals of the billionaire class behind Trump 2.0, they are trying to force Americans into new habits to forge new identities. When they say make America great again, they don't mean by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. They mean forced regression, forced change, forced habits to create new identities. But much like the line goes in The Matrix, the problem is choice. We still have agency. We still have choice. We still have a voice. So express it every chance you get. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Process. I appreciate you being here. Reminder, you can support me over on patreon.com/theprocess. You can also leave a rating, a review. A 5-star rating, a review helps other folks find the show. Share the show with somebody this week. I really appreciate all of you being here. And I hope to see you March 29th at noon in Warrensburg in person on the old courthouse square. Until then, be well. The Process is made possible by listener support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/theprocess or search The Process on Patreon. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for those of you who support me through Patreon to help me make this content and continue making it as long as possible. Enjoy American Aquarium, the world on fire. TV, trying to find some meaning, hoping that we'd wake up from this dream sometime tomorrow. Well, the night came and went, not a damn thing had changed. That's when I saw a tear fall from her eyes. She said, what are we gonna do? What's this world coming to? For the first time in my whole life,
stood there speechless. The load is heavy and the road is long, and we've only begun to fight. We just can't give in. We just can't give up. We must go boldly into the darkness and be the light. So I packed up my car and went looking for answers to the questions weighing on my mind. When did the land of the free become the home of the afraid? Afraid of the world, afraid of the truth, afraid of each other. This ain't the country my grandfather fought for, but I still see the hate he fought against. Give rest to the tired, give mercy to the poor, give warmth to the huddled masses, and I'll show you freedom. The load is heavy and the road is long, and we've only begun to fight. We just can't give in. We just can't give up. We must go boldly into the darkness and be the light. I got a baby girl coming in the spring. I worry about the world she's coming into, but she'll have my fight. She'll have her mama's fire. If anyone builds a wall in her journey,